Hello and welcome back to Expleo Explorers. This series zooms in on the 9 success factors for mastering business transformation. These were identified through data gathered by over 1,000 senior decision makers in Expleo's annual Business Transformation Index report. Thank you so much for the feedback on episodes 1 and 2 and on the series so far. We're glad to hear that people are enjoying it and finding it very useful. Welcome to episode 3. Today's success factor is keeping to deadlines. And what we want to get into the bottom of today is, why is it important outside of the obvious reasons that you think of when you think of keeping to deadlines? What are the common challenges that businesses and people experience when it comes to this success factor? And then ultimately, how can you master it and what tips can you take into your way of working after listening to this podcast? We hope you enjoy. Today's guest is Brian Chapman, CIO at Eir. Eir is Ireland's #1 broadband provider and delivers a comprehensive range of advanced voice, data, broadband and TV services to the residential, small business, enterprise and government markets. Brian's role as Chief Information Officer encompasses IT strategy, transformation, architecture, development and IT operations functions. And a key focus for Brian's team is on transformation of both the IT technology and processes that are used to deliver solutions for the business. Eir is renowned for being first to market with new products. Most notably, they were the first to offer Quad Play in 2014. And this includes a bundle of TV, landline, broadband and mobile offering to the market. As you know, being first to market with anything requires a culture that understands the importance of deadlines and keeping to them. And that's why Brian is an ideal person to talk to us today about the next success factor, delivering on time. Brian, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Siobhán. Thanks for having me.
So Brian, delivering on time is a really interesting topic and many organisations treat it with varying levels of importance. So let's start with your perception of this success factor. Why do you think delivering on time is important?
So for us, delivering on time is extremely important. And apart from the obvious, so like if you have delays on your timelines or delays on projects, obviously it can have implications on costs and often implications on scope or on quality, as you may have to take shortcuts to catch up on time. But apart those obvious elements for a moment, for me, delivering on time is about building trust. So for big transformation programs or complex delivery or indeed for organizational change, you're dealing with multiple stakeholders and you need their buy-in. And one of the key ways to get that and to maintain that, I guess, is delivery on time. So if you look at a big transformation program and you have interim milestones, if you deliver the early ones on time, your CFO is going to have something he can measure, or he or she can measure in terms of return on investment. The business or the customer will get their hands on the asset and they'll start to be able to see it and maybe launch a friendly user trial, start to get buy-in from their wider teams. And indeed, the IT resources as well, they start to see work and software in production and that motivates them and builds momentum as well. So all around, it creates an environment where you get continued buy-in and trust from the wider stakeholders. It's very important in that regard. And even if it ties back into a couple of the other factors that you kind of listed as key success factors for successful business outcomes around building wider board support and stakeholder support for programs, like they'll be looking at interim milestones and looking for on-time delivery to, I suppose, believe your story that this organizational change or these transformation programs are going to be effective. And also around utilization of products as well. Delivering on time is really, really important. It often takes a long time to deliver the final outcome, but delivering interim milestones to users to allow them to see the product you're building ultimately build support for when it's finally in production as well. I think we all know a program or programs that have slipped or dragged on and they've got reprioritized, their scope has changed, or indeed the products or vendors involved might have changed. And some of them get abandoned because they keep missing dates, but others get delivered. And even when they do, I guess stakeholders have lost confidence in them and it's very hard to get utilization of the product and buy-in because it has a bad reputation. So for lots and lots of reasons, time and delivery on time is very, very important.
Excellent. Yeah, there's loads of great reasons in there, as you've outlined. You know, the research in the Business Transformation Index, it stated that almost 1 in 3 businesses admitted that they'd recently missed deadlines, which is a huge proportion if you think we surveyed over 1,000 people. So what do you think the common challenges are that businesses and people are facing when it comes to delivering on time?
Delivering on time is very difficult, and there's lots of challenges. And look, from time to time, dates will be missed, that's for sure. The main one, I guess, and a very common one, is challenges around scope. So regardless of whether you're delivering in waterfall and you have your design work and your solution assessments done well in advance and scope agreed well in advance, these things take a long time to deliver, and scope and requirements can change. Or if you're delivering in a kind of more agile way or iterative delivery, you'll still have product owners, business owners, and whoever trying to take the opportunity to squeeze in little bits of change or get an extra feature put on a screen or whatever it might be. And it's in the interest of them building a better product, I guess. But these things are tricky to deal with. Like if you have big scope changes, it often triggers a kind of a whole replan, which isn't too detrimental to dates because you move expectations with it. But these smaller scope changes can really get out of hand. And I think you have to stay on top of those and make sure that the team are focused on delivering what's been agreed. The prioritization stays the same in the short term and lets them focus on what they want to do. And it's very strong change control is important for that. Other than that, I guess another thing that can really impact the ability to deliver on time is clarity on how decisions are made within a program. So lots of organizations require that decisions move up the chain into design authorities or into a head of or a director of IT to make key decisions. And that can take a lot of time. It can waste a lot of time. It can have a situation where key resources, whether they be developers or quality assurance resources, kind of sitting on their hands waiting for direction. And for me, it's very important that we move those decisions down the chain, that we give the authority to architects and to senior design resources to make design decisions. We give the authority to product owners and program managers to work together around prioritization and scope decisions for the immediate sprint or the next sprint, to allow them to make changes quickly, to avoid indecision, I guess, which ultimately wastes time. And like if you get these things right, if you have good change control and you have the right people with the right authority to make decisions quickly, you can generally live within your plan and you have a much better chance of hitting your dates and delivering on time.
That's really interesting, like empowering your people kind of all along the chain to make decisions. Is that something that is hard to track, like from a CIO point of view, if you have lots of people making lots of decisions on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, you need to have controls on that. You can't have everyone making decisions either. So it's about identifying what types of decisions can be made by what individuals, and then making sure that the wider program team know that. So for architectural decisions, there's one person or small group of people who can make those, and the developers, when they have a challenge around how to deliver on something, go to that resource and get a decision quickly. And similarly, if it's around a specific product or scope, maybe it's a product owner, or maybe it's the program manager if they're kind of trying to keep a track on scope creep, who ultimately makes the call on that. But there's certain things that obviously have to go up to design authorities, or will have to come up to kind of directors or head ofs in IT to make decisions for, I suppose, items that are wider reaching, potentially bigger than that sprint, bigger than that program. But as much as you can, if you can give the decision-making ability to people who are working on it day to day, who can solve it quickly, who don't need to, I suppose, redefine the issue or redescribe the issue to multiple people to ultimately get a decision, you'll move along faster. Because day to day, all these programs are faced with challenges around delivery, and the quicker you can make decisions on how you move on, the quicker you'll get to the end and the better chance you have of meeting your dates.
Absolutely. And in AIR, how much emphasis is placed on deadlines?
Huge. So we have a broad range of transformation programs running over multiple years. We're probably just more than halfway through it now, I'd say. And like a lot of our success today is because we have a kind of a culture that's very focused on milestones, on timelines, on dates. And in the main, we kind of have a very iterative approach to how we deliver our programs. And I kind of have the philosophy that we measure small and miss small. So you're really looking at the next release. You're trying to minimize any delays on that. It's very often that you go into a board meeting and you put up a slide that shows your program that's going to complete in 9 or 12 months' time and it's green, and that's great at that level. But you really need to be measuring the detail that's in front of you in the next 4 to 6 weeks and making sure that any issues that are likely to occur there will be resolved quickly, and that these small items don't compound, or that dependencies aren't missed and cause bigger problems. So there's a huge focus on timelines, on dates. Sometimes it's for external launches as well, which really we have no flexibility on. So some of our releases have impacts on external customers. So if you look at the work we do for our wholesale business, when we make changes, if the change of the data contract or an interface, and a third party that might buy services from us are changing their IT systems in parallel, but on a specific date, the data contract's going to change, and it has to change on that date. So we have to have structure in place to make sure that we can hit our dates. And that goes right across the organization. The people who are involved understand that the release dates that we published externally just have to be hit, and there's huge focus on that.
So the stakes are very high.
Yeah, they can be, absolutely. But that again is a motivation to keep your dates, so it's not a bad thing.
Absolutely. I liked that idea that you mentioned there of like setting small deadlines in order to reach your large deadline. So if you have like a large transformation program over a couple of years, having those incremental deadlines will make it like a lot more high chance of success, it's a really interesting approach. And do you think you'll probably see more of that now as you see businesses starting to move much more towards iterative, almost from project to product approach to things?
Yeah, I think everyone's already either moving or has moved to that type of delivery model. It works very, very well. But I guess you can still fall into the traps of missing the deadlines. You need to be focused on how you make sure that your sprints deliver what they should, that you're not always pushing deliverables into the next sprint and things down the road, that you're not letting scope change too frequently. Like, the great thing about iterative delivery and agile is that it gives flexibility. In a long-running program, if the stakes change, you can change your scope. You're not locked in to a solution that was defined for 4 months up front that you now have to build. You have that flexibility, but you need to make sure that doesn't get out of control, and that people aren't changing stuff all the time and using it as an opportunity to change their mind without thinking it through, I guess. So look, you need new controls, and it's equally as important to be date-driven and milestone focused. And you do need to keep an eye on the end goal as well. Like, some of the programs we're delivering span 3 or 4 years. And within those 3 or 4 years, there'll be 3 or 4 big releases into production. But for each of those big releases, there's 5, 6, 7 milestones that we need to measure as well. And so you're only ever a month or 6 weeks or 2 months away from something significant in that program. So there's always something on the horizon which is measured in detail, I guess. And if you keep those things under control, you have a much better chance of keeping the overall program under control.
Yeah. And I'd say there's people listening to this, you outlined a great case at the beginning of the podcast for why this is important. And there's probably people listening to this who've been in a situation where they feel like they've worked with somebody who met the deadline, but at what cost? Is that something that you have things in place to mitigate the risk around that?
So it depends. Like obviously it can't be at all costs. Depending on milestones that have to be met. Yeah, we've made compromises. So sometimes you'll drop a feature, or you'll bring in extra resources and it'll impact cost. So like, there are variables that might have to move to hit dates. And sometimes the variable that move might be the dates. Like if that's agreed across the business and with the wider stakeholders, that's fine. But it's like it surely can't be at all costs. Like, if you're running after dates and you throw something into production that's had light touch quality assurance and causes more problems than it's solving, like, that's only setting you back. And then the chaos that comes after that as you deal with bugs and cleanups only upsets your ongoing delivery for the following sprints anyway. So there's no real benefit in that. But look, you just need to assess, I guess, what are the priorities for any given delivery. Is the ultimate, outcome that you hit a date? And if you've got a product launch or something like that, it might be. And it might be okay to drop 1 or 2 or 3 kind of low priority features to get there. But often, certainly in our case, quality is the number one thing, and we need to make sure that we don't impact the production environments we have. So that'll come first. And ideally it comes on time. So we do work with our business colleagues, and we have really good cross-functional teams that are all focused on the date, to be fair. So there's a mindset over there to hit dates as well. And like from time to time, we will sit down and say this date's challenging. Let's go through the scope again. Are there low priority features that we could still proceed to your user trial without, or still deliver and have an MVP? I guess it's case by case basis really. But for us, delivery on time is definitely one of the key factors, but it's not at all costs.
Of course. Yeah, of course. And Expleo is delighted to play a role in that as well, from the quality perspective with there. So if we look at the data then from the other point of view, right? So how we asked the question around meeting deadlines and delivering on time, 22% have stated that they beat their deadlines, meaning that they've kind of launched in advance of what their timeline was. Do you think that that's a good or a bad thing?
That's not a bad thing. So like if you're delivering early, look, that's always a positive, I guess. But you'd have to sit back from that and ask yourself why, I guess. So for me, delivering on time is extremely important. Delivering early, it's good, but it's not a major priority for us. You'd have to sit back and ask, have you really challenged yourself in the first place in your planning? So if you're able to deliver significantly earlier than you originally intended, you question how you calculated your team's velocity, what scope you put into that release. Could you have done more? Did you test or challenge the team? I don't know. But I think when you think of the value that comes out of this, like obviously missing a date, terrible. Delivering on time, absolutely excellent. That's exactly what you need. All your dependencies are lined up. The business got the outcome they wanted. Delivering early, look, it's really good. And in many cases, it gives an extra benefit that whether you're ready ahead of time and you can do more prep ahead of a launch. But if it was happening all the time, I think I'd question how ambitious we were being, I guess. Why didn't you set an earlier date in the first place?
Excellent. So that brings us to the final part of our podcast. And we like to finish each episode with a synopsis for the listener, bringing together those nuggets of wisdom that you've shared with us throughout the last 20 minutes or so. And the top tips section is for people to impart practical advice to them about how they can master the success factor moving forward. So for the listeners, what are your top tips for mastering the success factor, delivering on time?
So I guess there's some fundamentals to start with. So in Air, we have really good cross-functional teams, and we've got a culture in here where we're focused on milestones and delivery dates across the board. And I think like that takes some time to build, but there's huge value when we do. So that's a kind of a foundation in here that works really well for us. And similarly, we have really good change control, and we kill distractors as much as we can. So in terms of short-term goals around sprints, we don't do a lot of reprioritization. We don't allow scope creep unless there's a very compelling case for it. So as kind of fundamentals there in place, and they're really important. But other than that, I guess, to be a couple of things I'd recommend, I guess, or tips. One would be to aim small, miss small. So measure upcoming releases closely and make sure that any potential time delays in the 4, 6, 8 week horizon, that you're all over them, because these are the things that compound and ultimately cause projects and programs to be late. Projects don't get delayed at the end, they get delayed every day. So you need to measure that. So we need to be focused on the upcoming milestones very, very closely and measuring very closely. And the other piece we've spoke about it already is make it easy for decisions to be made quickly, and make sure we're avoiding situations where indecision is causing delays. Build teams where you trust individuals to make decisions, whether it be technical resources or product owners or program managers. That day to day, they can make the right decisions, and fewer decisions need to come up to your enterprise design authorities or to your directors of IT, or God forbid, the CIO has to make a decision. But if you can delegate as much authority to people who can make these decisions quickly and keep plans moving, I think that gives you a much better chance of delivering on time.
Absolutely. They're great tips, Brian. Really, really good. And I liked what you mentioned earlier. I think as we move through this podcast series, there's a real intersectional, I suppose, pattern happening, and you're right when you said earlier that like each of the success factors that we cover week on week, they really are intrinsically linked, and you can see from each guest we have on every week that, they're here talking about a specific success factor, but they've actually got, so much expertise around the other ones as well. And it's almost like that makes them better at, nailing the success factor that they're talking about today. So
I think so. Like for me, the couple I mentioned earlier, so the support of board members, and actually the support of the wider stakeholders, not just board members. but also how you build support for utilization of what you're working on when it goes live. They tie quite closely to managing time well, and actually all three of them tie really closely into trust. So I'm interested to see what your speakers in the other podcasts will have to say on those. I'll be tuned in to listen for sure.
Oh, thanks, Brian. And thanks so much again for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thank you very much, Siobhán.
That's it for episode 3. We really hope that you enjoyed the conversation today, and a big thank you again to Brian Chapman for coming on and sharing his wisdom with the listeners. Thank you for tuning in to Expleo Explores. You'll find the Business Transformation Index on our website along with the other podcast episodes that have been released, and that's at expleo.com/podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. Do join in the conversation online. Just use the hashtag Expleo Explorers. So next up, we're sticking with the idea of these markers for transformation programs. I'm delighted to share that we welcome Ro Crawford from the DCC, the Data Communications Company. And Ro is going to be tackling the topic of successfully keeping to budget, another key indicator of successful transformation, as you'll see from the research that we've undertaken. We look forward to welcoming you all back next week, but in the meantime, we hope you have a great week.